No, no, not at all. I'm just an attendee.
Oh, okay. So where are you connecting from?
I'm connecting from Ibadan, Nigeria.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for joining us, right?
So Dr. Benjamin Stephanie is my very close friend, and I have been working with her for years. And there is also Dr. Gomez Ismail from Niger Republic, who is also a counter-terrorist expert and DDR expert from Niger Republic. He's
Oh, okay.
currently managing a project in Accra, Ghana. So,
Oh, okay.
and more people are also joining the webinar from Nigeria, Niger, and Chad Republic. Thank you, Stephanie, for being with us here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very good that we have somebody from Niger who also help us see things more from what. All right, so we have Mr. Idris joining us, Pamsor joining us. We are waiting for Lieutenant Tad Corker to join us, then Dr. Oku also to join us. So let's give ourselves probably like a minute or two to see whether they are going to join us for us to start the program. So Stephanie, this is your first time you've been following the program, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, this is my first time.
All right, yeah, but we've been collaborating with Budget IT. Budget IT is actually a Nigerian company, right? So we've been collaborating with them for the past 6 months to be hosting this program. So yeah, as time goes on, we'll get to know each other the more, right? As we focus our attention on terrorism.
Thank you. I look forward to listening and learning from you.
All right, so like I said, we are waiting for a couple of our guests to join. Right, some of them are still in meetings, and let's see, they are going to join very, very soon. So Esther is patient with that a little bit. Hello?
Benjamin, your microphone is muted. Benjamin, your microphone is muted.
All right. So hello and welcome to this edition of the Sankofa African Webinar. My name is Benjamin Akwe. I'm your rotational host for today. Friday, April 19, 2024, 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Nigerian time, and 2 p.m. GMT in Ghana, where the program is being hosted. I take this opportunity to thank all our listeners and viewers on the various social media platforms. I also take this opportunity to apologize to our cherished listeners for our inability to broadcast last week's Friday, April 12, 2024, due to the Islamic holiday. We are back today to discuss counterterrorism in Niger, a strategic partner in the Sahel region. Now, for those joining us for the first time, this panel discussion is part of our series on assessing U.S. strategic policies and relations under what we call the 3Ds program. When we say 3Ds, we mean diplomacy, defense, and development. What the program is currently doing is giving a platform, analyzing what great power strategic relations with the African continent. So when we say great powers, then we are looking at the US, China, you are looking at the EU, you are looking at Russia. These are the great powers. But for the past 6 months, we focused our attention on the United States. So our analysis is going to be within the framework of US strategic policies and what relations with the African continent. And that relations is summed up in what we call the 3Ds, which is diplomacy, defense, and development towards the African continent, right? We have made a detour from our regular programming of assessing upcoming elections on the African continent within the AU roadmap of silencing the guns 2030 to focus on counterterrorism and coups. So previously, we were looking at election situations on the African continent within the AU roadmap of silencing the guns. We did look at elections in South Africa, in Rwanda, South Sudan, Senegal. So we've looked at these elections, but given the role that Niger plays in counterterrorism, we've made a detour to look at counterterrorism and Niger, right? So today's discussion topic is Niger at the crossroads of superpower counterterrorism competition in the Sahel region. The question on the minds of many of our audience who have been following the election situation in some of African countries is why Niger? People will be asking, why have we moved away from election situations, right, in Africa and now focusing on Niger? Niger is so critical, given the country's political and diplomatic stalemate with ECOWAS after the 2023 coup d'etat and the country's junta government, the National Council for Safeguarding the Homeland, rejection of the 2012 Status of Force Agreement with the United States. Niger has been a key security partner in the Sahel and a crucial linchpin for U.S. counterterrorism efforts, hosting strategic U.S. air base in Agadez. Our panelists will interrogate why the U.S. has not made inroads in its counterterrorism programs through its Trans-Saharan Counterterrorism Partnership in the Sahel region, which many argue have emboldened extremist groups and contributed to the various coups in the Sahel region, especially in Niger, a key and strategic partner in the fight against terrorism. So the discussion's topic will be analyzed within the context of the U.S. government strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa, as announced by the Biden administration in August 2022. So the Biden administration came out with a policy framework towards sub-Saharan Africa in 2022. So we'll be making an analysis through that perspective. As time goes on, I'll give you some of the details of that strategy. And also the establishment of the President's Advisory Council on African Diaspora Engagement in the United States in December 2022. So we have the U.S. strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa, which was in August 2022. Then the president also came up with what they call Presidential Council for African Diaspora Engagement, which also came somewhere around December 2022. Then lastly, within the ECOWAS 2016 policy framework in security sector reform and governance. So we are looking at these three areas: U.S. strategy towards Sub-Saharan Africa, the establishment of Diaspora Engagement Council for engagement with African countries or Africa, and also 2016 ECOWAS policy and framework. Right. Now, so first of all, we are going to look at U.S. policy towards Sub-Saharan Africa, right? Now, I don't know whether those who are hosting the program will be able to show an important aspect of U.S. strategy towards Sub-Saharan Africa. I gave them an objective. Are you ready to share that objective with us? Nancy, can you display that particular objective on the screen for all of us to see, even though I've shared it with some of our panelists already? Yeah. Can you show it? All right, so I can, if you're not ready, I can briefly read it. An important aspect of U.S. strategy. So the U.S. has a strategy towards Sub-Saharan Africa. One of the strategic objectives, what I'm about to read, right? It says what? The United States will prioritize counterterrorism resources to reduce the threat from terrorist groups to the U.S. homeland, presence, and diplomatic and military facilities, directing unilateral capability only where lawful and where the threat is most acute. We will primarily work by, with, and through African partners in coordination with our key allies on a bilateral and multilateral basis to achieve clear city objectives and promote civilian-led, non-kinetic approaches where possible and effective. As part of this approach, we will employ tailored programs to build the capacity of local partners, security, intelligence, and judicial institutions to identify, disrupt, degrade, and share information on terrorists and their support networks. So this is one of the main objectives, strategic objectives for the U.S. on its counterterrorism for Sub-Saharan Africa. All right, so you can take it off. I will instruct you to go to the next one. Now let's proceed. Given the nature of Niger's tenuous relationship with ECOWAS with respect to the 2023 coup, ECOWAS sanctions and reversal of sanctions, and the junta government termination of its military agreement with the United States with immediate effect, an action that may affect U.S. counterterrorism efforts in the Sahel and lead to geopolitical power competition and influence in the region. The question is, how can the African diaspora play a key role in repairing this tenuous relationship between Niger, ECOWAS, and the U.S. for Niger to return to the Committee of Nations stronger to achieve its 3-year democratic transitional agenda? So like I said, the U.S. president in 2022, December, came up with what they call what? The Presidential Council for Diaspora Engagement. And the purpose is to strengthen dialogue between the United States officials and the African diaspora by elevating engagement through collaboration, partnership, community building among the United States, Africa, and other nationals globally. So it is upon this background that we at the Sankofa African reach out to the ECOWAS headquarters in Lagos, Abuja, to have a representative of the Peace and Security Commission join our panelists today to discuss the 2016 SSRG policy framework within the context of counterterrorism, and most importantly, hear alternative policy positions from our panelists and seek their inputs and support of the African diaspora and experts on the continent in bringing a finality to the stalemate in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Right, so this is the reason why we reach out to ECOWAS. So to our listeners and viewers in the various social media platforms around the world, the Sankofa African webinar is anchored on a myriad of perspectives. So there may be differences of opinions from our guests based on their expertise, knowledge, and experiences. The differences of opinions does not necessarily mean perspectives and thoughts shared are wrong, but reflect a divergence of ideas to address security challenges facing the African continent. The Sankofa African webinars relies on narrative for its discussions programs. Narratives that, as we know, are an integral part of African societies. And in our discussions, we utilize them in various African countries based on research findings, policy positions, and realities that prevails in African countries. These narratives help our panelists to present their perspectives independently, which sometimes may diverge from official government or organization policy positions. Right, so we are going to use narratives. It gives the guests the independence for them to deviate from whatever institution that they are representing, for them to present their own independent decision based on their expertise. So today, we are honored to have one, Dr. Danjuma Aku, who is the program officer, rostering and training at ECOWAS Commission, Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Peace Security. He is joining us from Abuja, Nigeria. If he's here with us, Dr. Aku, you are welcome to the Sankofa African webinar. Next, Dr. Bakari Samba is an international relations expert in stabilization, conflict prevention and terrorism, and regional director, Timbuktu Institute, African Center for Peace Studies. If he's here, Dr. Samba, you are also welcome to the Sankofa African webinar. Then we also have Dr. Pansu Nyasi. Did I get that pronunciation correct? Is it Pansu Nyasi?
Yes, sir. All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Right?
Pansu Nyasi.
All right. He's the program officer, ECOWAS Commission Security Sector Reform and Governance Regional Security Division, Abuja, Nigeria. He is here representing Dr. Colonel Abdurrahman Diang, who is the head of ECOWAS Regional Security Division. We were able to reach him, and he told us to have Dr. Panso Nasi to represent him on our discussion panel. Then next, we have Mr. Idris Mohammed, who is the founder of the Sahel Development Initiative. He's a journalist and expert in peace, security, conflict, and counter-violent extremism. He is joining us from Nigeria. And lastly, we have Lieutenant Akoka, who is a senior security sector consultant, right? He is joining us from Washington, D.C. So all our panelists, we are welcome to the Sankofa African webinar. Now, before we welcome our 1-minute remarks from our guests, I just want to give a quick update on what is happening in West Africa. There's a major development in the West African sub-region with respect to Togo. Togo, we know, is a bona fide mediator between Niger's junta government, the CNSP, and ECOWAS, which in the past week, Togo had a constitutional reform that was approved by its lawmakers ahead of postponed legislative and regional elections. Now, when I want to take into consideration when you are giving your opening remarks, right? Take into consideration the turn of events in Togo, right? With the recent constitutional amendment and the postponement of legislative and regional elections, and how that could lead to conflicts and its overall impact on security in the West African sub-region. We've seen in the past where there have been unconstitutional changes in government, right? And how it has led to conflicts in the region. It has led to security sector challenges. So when you are giving your opening remarks, which is going to be 1 minute, I want you to take into consideration the recent happenings in Togo and how that can lead to conflicts or can present security challenges to the West African sub-region as a whole. So let's with Dr. Danjuma Aku, your 1 minute opening remarks, taking into consideration what is happening in Togo.
Hello, Professor Benjamin. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Sure, yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, I'm somewhere where the internet is a bit challenging, so I'll quickly make my remarks before it throws me out of the meeting. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the panel. And also, before I make my remarks, would want to put a disclaimer that my comments this afternoon are actually personal comments. They do not represent the views of the institution for which I work for. So I'm here actually in a personal capacity, not in an official capacity of my institution. Having said this, I would want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here and also the topic for discussion. It's really it's a contemporary one. I will delve straight into the second aspect of the discussion for today, which is on how the African diaspora can play a key role in getting Niger back into the fold. Well, for me, I think the diaspora has a key role to play. It is not an issue that should be left to ECOWAS as an institution alone, but rather, I think it is a collective issue that we need all to put our hands on deck to address. The issue of Niger is actually twofold. First, there's the issue of the coup d'etat that has taken place in the country, and also second, there's the issue of the, so to speak, the threat or the notice by Niger to leave the community. So for me, these are two issues, two-in-one issues that needs to be handled very, very carefully. And to handle, I think the most immediate thing to do now is to get Niger to rescind its decision and other countries to rescind their decision to leave the community. This is one. And how do we do that? I think it's by using the African diaspora to play this role of dialogue, mediation, of underground diplomacy or shuttle diplomacy, if you would want to call it, so that they are able to reach out to these leaders, the military leaders in Niger. We need to find those people whom they listen to. We don't have to use official channels in mediation or dialogue. We can use informal channels, and I'm very sure there are people that these gentlemen are very close to, whom they can listen to when they speak. We need to identify those people, try to bring them on the table to dialogue with these individuals in Niger. On the issue of Togo, well, Togo, yes, is playing a key role. It's part of the, I think it's a 4-man team that ECOWAS had set up in one of its summits. Togo, Benin, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone were supposed to lead the team for dialogue with Niger. And unfortunately, the turn of events in Togo has also put another threat to democracy in the region, especially with the turn of events in Togo, postponement of the legislative elections. We put our hands on, our fingers and see what on the 29th of April. I guess this is when the election has been postponed to take place. So we are watching events to see how it is, but really this is also part of what ECOWAS stands against, the issues of tampering with the constitution 6 months before elections. And I'm aware that some of my colleagues were in Lomé for discussion with the authorities over there. So I'll stop here and allow my other panelists to make their comments. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. We understand your internet may go off, so thank you very much. So let's come to Dr. Panso Nyasi. We want your 1 minute assessment, right, before we go into the details of today's discussion, let's look at your 1 minute discussion. And Dr. Danjuma had to give this elaborate submission because his internet is a little frustrated. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And like Prof said earlier, I'm actually stepping in for my boss. So I'm the accidental panelist. So, but notwithstanding, I think my role also is a bit easier because I'm here to actually share some insights into the secure sector reform and governance policy framework of ECOWAS. And I think that should be easy. But then it's also good to have my senior colleagues here. Dr. Danjuma is here. And I also saw General Coca. So I think it's also relaxing. General Coca worked with me during the early days of reform in Gambia. So I was able to work with him closely as a representative security expert for America that time. But just to say that, ECOWAS, in its quest to really look at the issue of governance, particularly with a critical focus on the security, I think that's what necessitated the development of this policy framework that we'll be talking about today. So later in the discussion, I'll be taking us through the framework and what it intends to do, and more also the role of ECOWAS in all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's go to Lieutenant Coca. Your brief 1 minute introduction, looking within the framework of what is happening in Togo.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all, depending on where you are. It is a pleasure and a privilege to join you once again on this series. And Nyasi, it's good to if I don't see you, I do hear you, and so it's a joy to share this platform with you. Not too much on the Togo aspect of it, as I don't follow each country specifically to the extent that many others may do. But I will kind of real focus on Niger and ECOWAS and SSRG and so forth. I would also add, what you did not mention, is that the Sankofa series itself, and that is just the approach is to go back to help us to go forward, and so that's to the extent possible. That's part of my contribution, is because I have spent so much time throughout the whole the ECOWAS region. I would, in terms of just the introduction, this is a disclaimer. I don't represent any official position, just a personal or professional one at this point. And so that would be my contribution. For Dr. Aku, when he mentions the strategy for Niger and finding people, the diaspora, and for people that they feel comfortable talking to, I would add to that whoever does engage the leadership in Niger and the other countries, that they go in to with some extent with a script, and with the script being my emphasis, and that is the ECOWAS SSRG policy. That document is so rich with the way ahead in security, stability, and development for all the ECOWAS partner nations, that to me that would strike a nerve with the junta, specifically as they continue to emphasize to us their priority being homeland security. And so that would be my contributions. And also I would just underscore that the United States has been a key partner with all the countries in ECOWAS for decades. And so those three pillars, the defense, diplomacy, and developed, have been mainstays in U.S. government interaction. I think in my experience, the interaction has been bilaterally primarily rightfully so, but it's not appreciated at the ECOWAS level. And so that's also where we might be able to help contribute to say what no, we have been doing a lot, and we have been a very strong partner of many of the countries in West Africa. And so that is an outstanding foundation upon and a springboard for further cooperation. And I'll end there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. Idris Mohammed. Your 1 minute welcome address. Then we'll go to the details of our conversation today.
Okay, thank you very much for having me in this discussion. Unfortunately, I will not be able to on my camera because I lost my younger brother in the hand of terrorists just last few days. But due to the passion I have for this discussion, I said I will participate to give my thought on the issues. I think the political instability in the region remains a great concern for not only the African continent, also for the US, because United States has been investing resources and energy for over a decade with different policies on how to eliminate terrorists and other criminals in the region. But since the efforts are failing, as for me, I look at two things, the issue of disinformation and the issue of distrust among the people in West African countries also contributed a lot, in the counterterrorism effort failure. For example, now in the Niger Republic, a lot of intervention backed by US, have been failing since the military took over. So I think when we dwell deep into the conversation, I have a lot of things to share with my little experience on the field and different engagement with the stakeholders in the Niger Republic. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much to all our guests. Now, so let's delve into our conversation. Like I said, we use narratives. This morning, I did send you some of the narratives. So let's go to the first narrative. The first narrative is on ECOWAS 2016 policy framework on SSRNG. So that is going to be our narrative. I sent you an article written by Alan Bladen, right, and somebody else, right? I sent it to you this morning. So if you've seen it, I'll go deep into my question. My first question goes to Mr. Pansol Nyasi, right? Based on the narrative that I sent to you this morning on ECOWAS 2016 SSRG policy framework, I'm going to pose this question to you. Drawing upon the challenges that confronted security sector governance in the West African sub-region as a whole in the early 1990s, in countries like Guinea, Mali, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Gambia, what major shifts and reform did the 2016 ECOWAS policy framework for SSRG make to confront security sector challenges head on, prevent conflict, and hold practitioners accountable for effective governance? So just explain to us what is different about the 2016 SSRG policy compared to what happened, the security challenges that happened prior to 2016.
All right, thank you very much. So basically, let me start by saying that looking at historical experience of civil war and political instability, actually, that's what led ECOWAS to focus a lot on good governance in the security sector as a critical factor for a peaceful and prosperous West Africa. And because of this, that's what led to the development and adoption of this policy framework that we're talking about. And this was way back in 2016. And just to say that if you look at the secure sector reform policy framework of ECOWAS, it's connected to that of the African Union, which is also connected to that of the UN. So it's all connected because of the commonalities in the interest of all these institutions. So the center there is having a good secure sector governance. But I must also say that we also need to understand the role of ECOWAS when it comes to SSR. So when we talk about SSR, ECOWAS have some very, very clear-cut roles. And number one role of ECOWAS is a normative role. And what is this normative role? And that is adopting standards of democratic security governance commonly agreed by all member states based on resolutions and decisions. That's very, very, very important to note. So that's one role that ECOWAS play. Because ECOWAS is just a bigger government in West Africa. The way governments operates in member states, similarly, that's how ECOWAS operates. So we have authorities, which is the head of states, and they decide on some of these things. Number two role of ECOWAS in secure sector reform and governance is facilitating role. And here, what we mean by facilitating role, we are talking about mediating peace accords, supporting national security sector reform strategies, resource mobilization support for national government, that is member states of ECOWAS. And then another important role that ECOWAS play in SSR is enabling role. What do we mean by enabling role? That means ECOWAS is always willing and ready to accompany and to enable national initiatives through advocacy, through training, through capacity building, and through joint exercise. And the final role that ECOWAS play in secure sector reform and governance is to assess and do some fact findings and monitor compliance and look at and evaluate the whole impact of SSR programming. So having said that, therefore, we cannot run away from the fact that SSR is a technical process, but also a very political process. And knowing that members of ECOWAS, the member states, these are sovereign states. So in SSR, in secure sector reform, ECOWAS does not force it on any member state. The country must be willing to undergo reform, and ECOWAS now will accompany you in that process. And there have been a lot of approaches to this. If you look at SSR in ECOWAS region, so we have so many lessons we have learned, we have so many different interventions from ECOWAS. But then one thing I want to highlight is we have SSR in the context of crisis management. But not also only that, but we also have SSR in the context of democratic transition. So these are all having its different dynamics. There are some countries that actually went into war, and after the war, there was SSR launch. And there was also some countries that just needed some kind of what we call transformation. There has been a successful coup d'etat, not necessarily war, and then you want to undergo transformation to have good security governance. There are also some places where you have some poor democracy, and then they also embark on this. So different scenario of takes. But what is critical is in this framework, ECOWAS is looking at how do we ensure ownership. That's critical in all this, because there have been reforms, there have been some other elements here and there, like Prof was saying, prior to the advent of the SSRG framework. Yes, things have been happening, but in which framework? In how was these things designed? How were they implemented? A particular scenario is, let's say, maybe the case of Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone have been on SSR prior to ECOWAS having the framework in place. But if you look at the SSR of Sierra Leone, we also have to appreciate that what happened was we had government of the United Kingdom taking the lead role in organizing this, in spearheading, in funding, and actually coordinating all other external support, and even building the capacity of all the key stakeholders in SSR. But then, when the British government left, what happened to the SSR in Sierra Leone? It collapsed. It's collapsed. And these are some of the things that the SSRG framework of ECOWAS is looking at. How do we address this going forward? And that's why the element of national ownership is critical. But ECOWAS also is reminding member states that beyond national ownership is also the national responsibility. You know, General Coker will bear me witness. He was there in Gambia when SSR was launched. And so many international support, myself, you know, and himself were in a group called International Advisory Group on SSR and on the reform of the Gambia. So, and this message kept on coming on the table that there must be national ownership. The countries must be on the driving seat. But before this can be the case, the country must know. You know, we are talking here about Niger and other places. When we are talking about transition, the country must be very clear. Transition to what? What do you want to transit to? Transition into what? That picture must be very clear for any country that want to embark on these things. And they must know what they need and how they want to get there. So that whoever comes to support, whoever comes to be a partner, you can tell him or her clearly where it will add value. But sometimes because national governments don't have the resources or they don't plan to really see how to fund some of these programs, they now look outward to see what partners have. And sometimes they have their money and they also have their interests and they want to put their money, you know, in the area of their interests. So in a nutshell, these are some of the things that the framework is looking at. How do we institutionalize some of this? But again, you know, carrying along the member states and then allowing them to really have a say in this, because again, like I said earlier, they are sovereign member states and they have the right to decide what they want and how they want it and how they want to go about it. So maybe I'll stop here for now, and I'm happy to answer any question.
All right. Thank you very much, Right. Thank you for your submission, giving us a detailed explanation of what the 2016 SSRG simply means. Now, let me go back to Lieutenant Adcock. We've been having a lot of conversation, and you indicate to me that this current SSRG came as a result of what happening in Gambia. You made that very, 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 very clear. Now, what I want to know from you is looking at what has happened in Sierra Leone, in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, right? Would you say that there is something wrong in terms of the various governments taking ownership of implementing these for this SRG themselves? Would you say that based on what we have seen? Because we saw last year there was an attempted coup d'etat in Sierra Leone. We saw Niger, there's a coup d'etat. Mali, there's a coup d'etat. Burkina Faso. Is it that these governments have not been able to own the SSR themselves to be able to do these reforms to avoid some of these coup d'etats?
So, in response, first, let me congratulate Pansa Nyasi for bringing us up to date on that. Excellent feedback on ECOWAS and ECOWAS SSR and governance. In response to your question, what comes to my mind is if I read correctly, that the policy actually predated Gambia SSR. And so if it's again, if the heads of state, the Gambian heads of states kind of empowered it in 2016, then that was actually that was probably just before the historic election that resulted in a change in transfer of power. And as with Pence, we what with the good news is that ECOWAS policy does in fact kind of reflect the AUSSR as well as the UNSSR and so forth. When I review the ECOWAS policy, I got a profound understanding of not only what the heads of states, but probably also all the security leadership in the region was thinking when they produced the 2016 document. The 2016 document is pretty substantial, and it calls for tremendous change, both at the national level as well as the ECOWAS level. And so that's part of the curiosity in terms of how ECOWAS is doing now, because that policy is so dramatic in terms of its future potential, that just to kind of bring that to light and draw attention to it. Now, whether or not so. That said, and what's happened from 2016 up till the present, with the coups in 2022, 2023, yeah, and so forth, that's to me that's a reflection that policy is not a is probably has not been very broadly recognized, distributed, read, digested, and processed, so on and so forth. And so, as I was telling one of your other colleagues earlier, that you cannot do it. Nyasi and others can't do it. They can't. But it would be a strong recommendation for that policy to be what kind of required reading. And so as a required reading, that kind of gives everybody kind of on the same sheet of music and the same document from as a starting point to progress. What the policy acknowledged was, as you were saying, all the history from the in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and so forth, and kind of the how we got here, kind of a thing, and how we got here isn't pretty. And so, however, here we are, a couple of decades later now in 2024, and trying to, progress. And so it's a time to kind of draw attention to the common objective, and that is for, not only the reform, but the stability aspect of it and the good governance. And so that is, an outside independent assessors should come in and say, well, where do we stand on some of this? And had that been done, that that may have kind of drawn attention to things that were flawed and that were becoming problematic in Burkina Faso and in Mali and in Niger, especially on a topic that we're talking about, that's the counterterrorism. And so we kind of took our eye both at the national level, the ECOWAS level, and at the international level, kind of took our eye off of what was happening, to allow these types of things to come to pass, coup after coup after coup, and likewise, with the prospects of other coups. And so that's the part of the point of kind of keeping the eye focused at this point at the regional level at ECOWAS on and others, as one of the other speakers talked about, the diaspora kind of taking a look at this and making contributions. And so, if anything, that's what I would say in terms of the approach is there have to be a number of eyes kind of on what's going on, to be able to kind of draw attention to where things are maybe kind of headed to had headed into harm's way and the types of results that we hope trying to avoid. And so others say, well, wait, okay, this is with the Sahel kind of, that's a precursor of what else is going to go on in terms of other countries kind of taking similar routes and other militaries taking action in this regard. But and it has to be, we have to kind of keep your fingers on the pulse, both at the regional and the international level, going forward. Over.
All right, thank you very much. Let me come to you, Dr. Danjuma Aku, right? Now, we're looking at these three countries, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. The coup leaders over there always cite bad governance as an excuse for them taking over the reins of government. We know historically, most African countries, the military plays a key role, right? They sometimes claim themselves to be the guardians of our democracy. So whenever things are getting worse, they feel like they have that right to step in, right? To make corrections. If we are talking about security sector reform and governance, right? Shouldn't we have a situation where, irrespective of whatever is happening in government, whether it's bad government or good governance, the military should not play any active role in democracy? Shouldn't that be the case?
Thank you, Prof, for this question. I think you took it just right out of my mouth. I think the militaries everywhere in the world have constitutional roles to play, and in hardly any of the constitutions will you see that the military has been given a political role in leading the nations. So one, the military itself is overstepping its boundaries by stepping into or delving into political issues. And second, the military does not have any solution to political issues because they are not trained to handle political issues. They are trained to handle security issues. And therefore, if there are security challenges, as they claim, is the reason why they should take over political power. I think the best thing to do is to go and fight the security challenges, not by taking over political power. For instance, Burkina Faso that has claimed that it's because of the terrorist attacks that they have the military took over power. In fact, the security situation is worse than it is right now. More than 60% has been taken over by terrorists. In contrast to just about maybe say 20% when President Mark Kabore was in power. Now, having said that, we're talking about security sector reform. I think we need also a political sector reform in in West Africa. This is because our political leaders themselves have not behaved in a responsible manner, as the case may be. Now, I don't know what it takes for our political leaders to deliver the key dividends of democracy, of governance, where people have access to education, to health, to infrastructure and other things that people in other climes take for granted. So we need, our political leaders need to know that this is why they are in government, is to provide the infrastructure that the people require. Now, there is no accountability. Government funds are being spent with reckless abundance. People who do not have any means, no factory, no business, suddenly become overnight billionaires because they are in governance. Now, this needs to stop. The rule of law, the people rule, the political elites rule with so much impunity, right? Like the laws are made for others, and they are the exception. Now, all these things need to stop for us to have a fledgling democracy, these things will have to be put in place. We have to have good governance. Now, I'm saying this with all seriousness that we need this political reform, just like we're doing the security sector reform. Our political leaders need to behave also in a responsible manner by ensuring that they deliver to the citizens what the citizens require. Some countries within the region, really require this, what's it called, this political reform, because they have had history of coups and counter coups, and even where there is a sense of democracy, it is the leader that has cheated into being a dropped his boots and uniform, and now is wearing his civilian attire. That is all. But the governance. So it is like you still have the military man in power, even though he's a civilian. So that is why you find out that even when there is a symbol of some sort of democracy, it is not democracy. Democracy doesn't end with elections. There is the aspect of the governance also that we need to look at. So that's why, for me, I'm advocating for a political governance reforms in our region. Just like we're doing the security sector reform, we need to also do a political sector reform in the region. Now, where you also have civilians that are pure civilians who are governing their own countries, they are the ones who are changing the constitution a few months to the elections. So, that's why I'm proposing this political sector reform. Now, they need to behave in a responsible manner to know that, you cannot do governance for forever. And for the military also, it is not their role to say that because there is bad governance, then you have to take over power at all means, because you have the guns that have been provided for you by the state itself, and then you turn those guns on the state itself that has provided that for you. I think this is also not the proper thing to do. The military should restrict itself to its constitutionally assigned roles of protecting the national integrity of the country. So with these few points, I would want to stop here and allow my other panelists to make their contributions. Thank you, Prof. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much for your submission. Right? I appreciate that so much. Now, Dr. Panso, Mr. Panso, you're going to have the last word on this particular narrative. Now, Dr. Akwa is talking about, once we are thinking about security sector reform, right, that should go hand in hand with political reform, right? Because we cannot be cannot be providing the army with the facilities that they need, and they use those same facilities to turn against the government. And at the same time, the government that we have entrusted power into, civilian governments, they are also engaged in all kinds of corruption. So there should be a hand in terms of political reform and security sector reform. Do you agree with his assertion?
Yeah, Prof. I think Doctor is completely right. Dr. Danjuma is absolutely right. And that's why, again, back to the ECOWAS security sector reform and governance framework, that's why we are trying to get some of these things right. Why do I say so? Because if you look at the SSRT framework, we are now saying we are dramatically shifting away from regime security to human security. The previous security sector or institutions we had in place is purely regime security. And like Dr. Danjuma was saying, the military are your friend, as a president, as far as they are protecting you, even if they are doing the wrong things. Do you understand? Once you are good, they are maintaining you in power, they are protecting you, even if they are really, stepping on the rights of other citizens, you don't seem to care sometimes. But the day that they turn against you, and it's only you as an individual, then that's the time you see that the security is bad. That's not to say that what the security is doing is right. It's just like what the doctor said. The security can never be can never be good politicians, and therefore they must just stay away from it. Two wrongs cannot make a right. There's bad governance and whatever. Does not necessarily mean that as you as a military now, you should drop your uniform and then jump and be the political leaders. Not at all. But just to say that another aspect where the secure sector reform governance framework of ECOWAS is also looking at how to handle some of this is the aspect of oversight. If you look at the framework, it talks a lot about oversight. So oversight here from the parliament, from the human rights institutions, from the civil society, from the media, from the academia, from the think tank. All these people have a say in the governance structure of our countries. But then we are saying, how do we make them effective? Because, again, these are sovereign states. To some extent, all ECOWAS can do and AU and whatever is to go into dialogue, is to go, negotiate and to put things back in order. But if we have the citizens of those countries who are aware, who knows they are right, who are intelligent enough, who know the constitution, to really rise up to the occasion and say, sir, you can't do this. As a general, you can't do this. The voices of the masses within that country, are stronger than the external voices. That's what we have seen in reality. You remember the Maghreb case, the revolution in the Arab world. It's the people within. Before outsiders can, it's the people within. So, and this is what the framework is looking at. How do we get CSOs involved? How do we get the parliament to be involved not as a partisan, parliament, but as people that the public have entrusted their affairs into, the people that have been voted to represent them, to speak to the issues. How do we get the media to report on these things objectively, clearly, not all this funny way of reporting? How do we get the academia as intellectuals to analyze some of these things vis-a-vis the current realities? How do we get the think tanks on board? This is the approach. And we are thinking that once some of these things, it's a long way and it will take us some time. We are just some less than 10 years when this thing was launched. And we still have a lot of challenges. People are not aware. Many people are still not aware of the framework. Even though when you talk about SSR in the whole of Africa, ECOWAS is doing better with all humility. ECOWAS is doing better than any other region in Africa. But we still have a long way to go in terms of awareness, in terms of capacity, in terms of engagement, in terms of dialogue, in terms of collective kind of interaction in all of this. And this is the direction we are going with the framework of ECOWAS. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to the next narrative, which has to do with good governance. We try to weave it into counterterrorism and coups. So I sent you a narrative on counterterrorism and coups, right? We don't have enough time to display it on the screen. But let me come to you, Dr. Nanjuma, right? Now, there is a school of thought that makes the argument that the coastal West African sub-region and the Sahel, there is a struggle between countering violent extremism and homeland security enforcement in terms of internal law and order, right? This is as a result of deaths, right? The countries in the Sahel region and the country in the coastal West African region, they have a lot of debts that they have to repay. There's a lot of youth unemployment. There's lack of education. There's poverty. There's lack of basic amenities. These challenges, according to some people, makes it difficult for these countries or this government to be effective in crafting a cohesive national and development policy, right? Thereby leading their citizens to become vulnerable to violent extremism. So while they are focused on what? Homeland security, how to deal with internal threats, right? They are also being compelled to deal with external threats, which has to do with counterterrorism. And since they have all these challenges in terms of debt, in terms of unemployment, youth unemployment, lack of access to facilities, it makes it very, very difficult for them to be able to address some of these challenges that they're dealing with. Will you agree to that?
Yeah, Prof. I agree with that narrative, because if you look at the what do you say now, the map, or the how the West African region is located, you find out that the threats are spreading now from the Sahelian states to into the coastal states. Right now, there are attacks in Cote d'Ivoire, in Togo, in Benin Republic. The threats are also coming down towards Ghana. So, because of the fact that the countries around the three border region of that Liptako Gruma, the terrorists are beginning to have some form of spreading their tentacles beyond that border. And also, the other part of it is the one that is at the Lake Chad Basin, where you have Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad fighting these terrorists. Now, it's true that the challenges are taking, the security challenges are taking a toll on the little resources that are available to government to be able to provide good governance. Now, this is where we now have to call on our development partners, the developed world, to assist us. Not all will come to you for assistance without getting something back out of it. In fact, they get more than what they are putting it, one way or the other. But we will need those development partners to help us in providing some of the what do you say? Some of the amenities we might need at the local level. Now, there is a lack of ownership at the local level, because people come with their own ideas and presume that this is what the locals would want. But rather, I think as part of the development world or development program management, is to allow the people who own the process. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're listening. Yeah, you are.
Okay. Is to allow the people who own the process of whatever development programs that you are bringing on board, rather than coming with a one-size-fits-all approach that the people might even resent in the first place. So yes, there will be need for involvement of the development world. We will need to involve also our the private sector. Now, in terms of security, we assume that government alone is able to fund the or mobilize all the resources it needs to fund security challenges. I think we might need to involve some more the private sector, the big multinational companies, in funding the security sector within our region. And that way, when we involve them, we mobilize those funds from them. It will free out some of the funds for the government to carry out some of its development projects. So I believe we need to, yes, go into partnership with developed countries. Second, to also look from within to mobilize funds from the private sectors and other multinational companies that are operating within. So it's a disturbing sound somewhere, so I'll stop here.
Yeah, DK, can you unmute? Can you mute yourself, DK? DK, Nancy, can you mute DK for us? We're getting feedback from. Nancy.
Benjamin, you're muted.
Dr. Danjuma Aku was making the argument that we need our development partners to come and assist in terms of what the debt development in the various countries. Don't forget, the development partners also come with their own agenda. Mostly it is counterterrorism, right? And we've seen situations the U.S. doesn't deal directly with the coastal West African countries, which are the clients. Historically, you see that because the French have had a lot of dominance in most of these French-speaking countries, the U.S. mostly deals with the French, and the French deals with these countries. And like he said, it has created a lot of resentment within the military in the sub-region, right? So is it that the U.S. needs to refocus its attention with dealing directly with the client, which are the states, rather than relying on the French to do that?
Is this directed towards me?
No, Mr. Pansonyasi.
Okay.
Sorry, Prof, my internet was, I beg your pardon. I don't know if you can just, my internet is fluctuating. I didn't get you clearly,
Okay.
sorry.
Did you hear my question?
Not clearly, sorry.
Okay,
Just
so
a minute.
Dr. Danjuma make the argument that we know there's a struggle between what? Counterterrorism and homeland security. The countries in the Sahel, in the coastal West African region, are worried about their own internal security as a result of debts that they have accumulated over the years, youth unemployment. They have lack of education for their citizens. So they are worried about these things internally. Now, the international partners, when they come, their main focus has to do with counterterrorism, right? So there's this struggle, right? And we know that the U.S. has been an effective partner in terms of giving resources for development in the region. But mostly the U.S. has dealt with the French. It's the time that the U.S. reconsider its policy, dealing directly with the clients, which are the states, rather than relying on the intermediary, the French, which they have pushed out recently. Don't you think that it's time the U.S. reconsider its policy to deal directly with these Sahel countries or these coastal West Africa countries directly?
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Yes, just my personal view, and that's not necessarily connected to the SSRG framework, but a personal view, and not necessarily also the view of ECOWAS. So one must say that, you know, if you look at the international community, we are all aware of the fact that all of them have their partners, but they also have their allies. And historically, if you look at security in general, you know, globally, you discover that French, the UK, the US have been consistent allies. If French have an interest in some area, you know, they carry along the UK and France. And if France have an interest in an area, they carry along the US and UK. So this has happened way back, you know, before some of us were born, and it's still happening. You can look at the case of Libya. You can look at the case of even the countries within ECOWAS. You can even look at, you know, all what is happening within the region in terms of the relationship between our Francophone countries and France. And because France have been a very dependable, you know, in quote, ally to the US, US also have to be seen, you know, being a sympathizer and a good partner to France in doing some of these things. So, but again, like Dr. said earlier, Dr. Danjuma, these people always have their interests. And going back to our secure sector reform framework, that's why we said, you know, in as much as we are talking about national ownership, that ownership must be, you know, considered holistically. Because where you talk about ownership, you should talk about your responsibility. You know, but you cannot be shouting ownership when you are not fulfilling your responsibility. And one of the critical responsibility that is lacking that's affecting security sector reform majorly in the region is because of lack of funding or lack of commitment by national government. If you look all around, all our member states, how many of them, are putting money into the so-called reform that they said they want to do? So these are the things. And our international partners are interested in counterterrorism. They are interested in maritime security. We just concluded maritime thing with EU, Germans, whatever, just yesterday in ECOWAS Commission. This is where they're interested. And why? It's not far-fetched. They have so many ships coming to Africa, bringing their goods. It's good for their economy. And they don't want any threat to affect these ships in the sea. They want the security and safety of their ships in the sea, in our waters. And therefore, they want to invest money in maritime safety and security because it's good for their economy. So it's natural. Human beings, even we in Africa, we will also put ourselves first. So these are the realities on the ground. And when you look at SSR is resource intensive when you want to do reform. Some aspect of SSR, is very expensive. And I don't want to go into all this NATO agreement and whatever, but there are some strings in NATO agreement, NATO members that they can't do when it comes to our SSR in Africa. These are all things we also have to know as Africans. And these are the reality on the ground. So that's why, we really need to look at our own strategies and ways of actually doing this. And we need to engage our partners strategically, and have a kind of a symbiosis relationship. Definitely their interest is important because they are bringing their money, but it should also not jeopardize our own safety and interest and for the safety of our people. So that is the thing. And security is paramount. There's no development without security, and there's no security without development. They're intertwined. But how do we balance the equation? I think that's the critical thing here. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me come to Lieutenant Arkoka, right? If you listen to the submission made by Pausa and Dr. Danjuma Aku, right, there's a conflict, right? While the international partners want what? Counterterrorism, African countries are dealing with their own internal challenges, development, youth, and employment. Why do you draw the balance, right? As a way of satisfying the international partners in terms of counterterrorism, at the same time, African countries also addressing their fuel debt that they have to always be servicing. Almost all African countries, especially the Sahel and the coastal West African region, are highly indebted. So how do you draw the balance so as to be able to satisfy the international partners at the same time also deal with their own internal homeland security threats?
So thank you for the opportunity to reply. A number of observations from this conversation. So thank you. First is that the donor community, the international community, specifically the United States of America, has been applying substantial resources across the African continent for decades. And so while there may be the appearance that it's counterterrorism and that type of a vein, that is part true. The bigger part is that the U.S. has applied significant resources for the Millennial Challenge and also for the Sustainable Development Goals and Objectives. And the U.S. being a superpower, you can only imagine that when it opens up its purse, it's able to do so in a substantial way. And that's why we have tried to alert the audience to, as you had mentioned at the outset, to the U.S. strategy for sub-Saharan Africa that said that we're going to make a 10-year commitment of hundreds of millions of dollars in many of these areas. And so one of the areas is democracy. Another area may be human security. Another area may be the digital transformation, and so on and so forth. The U.S. strategy also calls for significant investments in what? Infrastructure. And that's again, those are the man signals from the Africa Leaders Summit that President Biden hosted a while back. They also have made significant investments in industry. Now, now that said, and the U.S. has done this bilaterally with every partner in ECOWAS. And so, and it has robust, integrated country strategies to help that country to satisfy that country's needs and requirements and desires above and beyond counterterrorism and security. Once again, the efforts are substantial. So that is one. And then the second is that in addition to the U.S. strategy for sub-Saharan Africa, there's also the more recent U.S. strategy for preventing conflict and promoting stability in the coastal West African countries. And so that's an outlay above and beyond the U.S. Strategy for sub-Saharan Africa. And then third, on top of that, if for those who are following, there's also something that comes as an act of the U.S. Congress, and that is called the Global Fragility Act. And so the U.S. is making substantial contributions in all of these areas on a very massive scale. Now, but however, that said, now, and getting back to Professor Aku's remark about one size fits all, excellent remark, and that's what everyone might be careful of and mindful of, is that whether or not the U.S. and other interventions are one size fits all. You need to figure it out. And so it needs to be figured out both on the bilateral level as well as the regional ECOWAS level. And so part of it, and this may kind of also reflect on the Sahel and how things have gone amiss there, is that as Brother Pansal Nyasi says, they have the partners and the allies, and absolutely that said, but it's an information matter. It's a knowledge and strategic matter. Everyone has to know it's a strategic approach to these different players. And part of the strategic approach is knowing the person that you are engaging strategically with. And so that's one is really knowing the U.S. and knowing, again, you talked about the D3, the diplomacy, defense, and development. And so now, but if folks know as that they have and what there may be some things in the U.S. toolkit might not be the right toolkit. It might not be the right one size fits all. And so as we have said before, is that with Niger and Niger's focus on homeland security, but the U.S. Department of Defense does not deal in the homeland security area, but the U.S. Department of Homeland Security does. And so that's part of finding a happy middle ground to go forward. And that is where the one size fits all. The U.S. cannot apply one size fits all. Equally, the host countries cannot do a one size fits all. And part of it is understanding what the U.S. does or does not bring to the table. And so And then also at the in the middle layer, the mediator level, which I refer to as ECOWAS, is that they have someone there must know, the U.S. toolbox and how it works or not works, how it may fit or how it may not fit. And so again, that way, the ECOWAS kind of is able to buy the guidance and also kind of the intermediary for the sovereignty of the host nations. Nevertheless, there has to be a strategic approach with strategic solutions. And the last one I will comment on is U.S. relations. Absolutely, many countries have partners, and so they have in ECOWAS. ECOWAS has had its partners for a long time. Absolutely, the U.S.-French partnership clearly goes back to the U.S. Revolution back in the 1770s, and so it was France that helped us to defeat the Brits at the time, and so you can only imagine that partnership has only kind of strengthened over time. So that's also that partnership is one of those that is longstanding and enduring, and it will remain that way. And when we deal bilaterally on the different countries in ECOWAS, that's just a respectful thing. That's just the U.S. and France goes back hundreds of years now, and so that's a given. And so using that as a given. Now that said, the U.S. does not excuse the France for how it has comported itself in the countries and on the continent over decades. And so if it comes to pass that one country has been extractive in nature, then that has to be kind of confronted in a respectful manner as well. But what the U.S. does not want to do is the U.S. does not want to follow in trace of France and be extractive. The U.S. wants to be constructive and help and come with a as the strategy says, kind of help our partners to advance on their own terms.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Right. Let's go to because of time, let's go to the last narrative, which is on counterterrorism competition in Niger and its overall impact on the Sahel and the CW regions, right? I sent you a narrative on that. Let's come to you, Mrs. Panso Nyasi, right? We saw that somewhere in March, right, the U.S. had to dispatch a delegation to go and meet the junta to try to iron out the differences in terms of the status of force agreement, the 2012 status force agreement. The junta came out and said, well, the U.S. must leave its military base. The agreement is over. We saw that. What is it that now, when they came out, the sources are saying that the U.S. was a little bit condescending towards the junta. That is one. Secondly, the U.S. historically has not been sharing intelligence with with Niger. At the same time, the uranium has been taken away. Then the country is so poor. Right now, we see the Russians coming in. Right. So you are replacing one superpower with another superpower. What is going to be the overall impact of the Russians coming into the Sahel region on security sector reform in the coastal West Africa region and Sahel region?
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, I will start by saying that some of these things are decisions of sovereign states. And again, I speak as an individual with my little knowledge on this, not necessarily person of ECOWAS. So if you look at the approach, obviously, many of us condemned what the approach that the junta is actually using. Because if you are talking about we want to take over control of our country, we want to be fully independent, we want to manage our affairs, and then you are one day wake up and then you have the Russians, then that's not the solution. Taking out France and bringing Russia is not that's not the formula, and that's not the formula that we think is genuine. So if you want to be independent, as a sovereign state, you think you are not happy with the way France is meddling in your affairs, then you don't replace them with another body that is outside or another country outside our region or our continent. But again, in terms of looking at our own framework and the security issues as a whole, we have to go back to what I said earlier. SSR is a political process and it's also a technical process, but it must be done, jointly with the government of that member state. Because any SSR that the government did not buy into will fail from the beginning, from the design, because the government is in the center of everything. The government remains in the center. And therefore, if you don't have the buying of the government, you will definitely fail. You will definitely fail. And even if you have the buying in of the government and you don't really streamline what are your expected outputs or outcomes in this whole exercise, you are bound to fail. So this is not the case in Niger, because we have the junta there, and at least with some of the policies of ECOWAS and whatever, there's a lot of things to be done on that. So therefore, practically speaking, it's not a case that we can really be talking of SSR. I know at some point, Junior Conakry, there was some discussion at our, master's level, senior people or management level, in terms of, looking at a way or an opportunity to really do reform. That started, but now I don't know where it is, because it was at our superiors level. But unless and until something like that happened, the government say, oh, we need to reform, we need the support of ECOWAS, then ECOWAS will get involved. But once ECOWAS and that particular, whatever the country is, are they not speaking from or singing from the same hymn book, then we are not even thinking of embarking on SSR, because it will definitely fail,
All right. Thank you very much. Let me come to Lieutenant Tarkoka. Dr. Danjuma said he has an emergency, so he has to leave. Let me ask you, based on what has happened last week, we know last week the Russians had to send their instructors and a whole jet to deliver some weapons to the junta, right? On the Friday, there was a demonstration by the G52 group, right? Trying to tell the Russians, the Americans have to leave. And they are talking about not sharing intelligence and all these things. Given your experience as somebody with a military background and in your dealings and your engagement with the military in Africa, what do you think the junta government wants?
So that's a very good question. I don't want to try to kind of get in their minds and think about what they may or may not want. The professor started out by saying that part of the solution to the impasse is finding someone that they are willing to listen to. And so that again, to know what they want, you'd have to kind of go and sit down and listen to them. And actually, that would be the approach, to try to ascertain what they want. But now that said, is that from a military person, they have I definitely can relate to their state of mind. And what I can relate to is I can relate to their sensitivity when their soldiers get harmed or killed. And so, that's as a military leader, kind of that's first and foremost is the force protection, keeping your men home and alive. Now, so that would be number one. Is that the military was extracting a high cost from these counterterrorism operations. And then also their capacity. They just don't have their capacity is not as great as it could be. So those would be the part of the areas that I would talk in terms of the intelligence that was that. I don't know the extent of the accuracy of that one because it would be part of the U.S. model to do what we refer to as information sharing, and so that would be critical to the success of any operation. Now, in terms of the junta was is taking it properly in terms of their interest and concern is for homeland security, and so that is now that said is that the part of what was required was for them to sit down with others to kind of really figure out what that means to them. And so there seems to be a disconnect in terms of what they're trying to achieve and what others, and in this case, outsiders were trying to achieve. Most recently, the U.S., and I think the U.S. might still be there, and before that, the French. And so they just, I don't know to the extent to which they had full and honest conversations about what they want to achieve, both the Nigerians and the Burkinabe and also with the Malians. And so that would be at the ECOWAS level, that would be the first place you see, okay, what are you trying to achieve? What military objectives are you trying to achieve? As the professor says, it's definitely not political objectives. It's maybe either military and or human security objectives, but they are not so if ECOWAS doesn't know what they are, then they are the junta's objectives are opaque to them as they were to the U.S. and to France. Now, well, so what does that mean for others coming in? Is that there are a couple of observations. One with the Russians is that where the Russians differ from the U.S. and from the France is that both the U.S. and France have been partnering with the Nigerian, Malian, and Burkinabe security sectors for decades. And so, and not only there on the ground in the country, but also, they have many of the military professionals, have had the benefit of coming back and going to different types of, international military education and training programs. So they have had a great exposure. In particular with the Sahel countries and the others, the U.S. Department of Defense had a BPC, Building Partner Capacity Program, for well over a decade. And so that was, again, something that was ongoing. And part of the question is, well, to what extent, that building partner capacity was effective or not effective needs to be what is discussed at some point to figure out that we have, again, if getting back to the one size fits all, that if that's part what's going on here, not only one size fits all, but if the tools that partners are offering are not the tools that are that are perceived as the right fit to the fit the purpose, then that has to be discussed. But none of us are mind readers, and so we just don't know, where what is being offered or approached is hitting or is not. And no one else, the Russians or the Chinese or the Indians or you name it, has a silver ball to be able to say, well, we know what's wrong and we know how to fix it. That is not going to happen. So I think they're going to kind of still be, and I don't know that they're going to advance with their security in the near term. Over.
All right, thank you very much. Time is fast spent, right? But I think that we can have a second section of this conversation in terms of the U.S. and in terms of what the Russians coming, the Chinese coming in, right? So and like Dr. Danjuma was talking about, ECOWAS has to take into consideration how to use the private sector consultants to get in to see how best they can also assist or support them in terms of talking with a junta. So probably we end today and try to arrange for a second series of this conversation, right? Next week, we are going to focus on Togo, right? So we'll not get an opportunity to have this. Maybe the week after, we'll try to look at Niger and how the diaspora can fit in to be able to navigate between what ECOWAS and also between the US to have a perfect solution or somehow a calm solution how to resolve all these differences. So on this note, we can come to the end of the program. We have Dr. Panso Nashi, if you are there, your closing remarks. If you are not there, we can go to Dr. Mr. Tatoka for a closing remark. Then we'll try to negotiate on how we can have a second series on this. If you are there, can you give us your closing remarks briefly?
Thank you so much, Prof. And I must say that it was a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this discussion, learning from great people in the panel. It was a great one. Just to say that SSR is complex and ECOWAS is doing its best, and we'll keep on looking at policies on how to really forge ahead. But it's like we say, SSR is not an event. It's a process, and it takes time. Countries where they have done SSR, they have done it for 15 years, and still sometimes you are disappointed with certain things that you see. So it's a process that really will force you to be patient if you are not. On that note, thank you very much, and appreciate it. And I will also give feedback to my boss as to what has happened here today. Thank you.
Sure, we'll stay in touch with you. I think Ibrahim Mohammed Bello, I don't know who you are, but do you have anything to say? Go ahead, Ibrahim. Ibrahim Mohammed Bello, do you have anything to say? All right, so let's come to you, Lieutenant Takoka, your closing remarks as we arrange for a second series on this.
I thank you. It has been an honor and a privilege and pleasure to be on this panel and to kind of hear my good friend from Pansaw and others contributing. I would say again the two key objectives of the U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa, U.S. strategy for Sub-Saharan Africa is for this program, it's one objective is to foster openness and open societies, and then another objective is to deliver democratic and security dividends. And that and with that said, is that the U.S. has 50 states, and so but collectively it's the United States. And but it does go bilaterally and respects the sovereignty, but it goes regionally and continentally in terms of the regional economic communities as the Africa Union itself. And so you kind of keep it on that level. And with the strategy, I would just encourage ECOWAS to also kind of think on it on that level by partnering with the U.S. I would also kind of just let ECOWAS know that as this program talked about defense development and diplomacy, the U.S. and the sovereignty aspect has been going bilaterally with the ECOWAS member countries. And that's diplomatically. So we have the embassies, but also we have done it with development, and so we have all the USAID offices in the different countries. The difference in the last 15 years or so is that in recognition of having to do things on a beyond, across borders and regionally, our development has expanded to now feature a regional development office. And so you have the USAID West Africa which would be on par, if you will, with ECOWAS. And so, that is another inroad in terms of kind of what we're doing. And USAID is responsible for administering the U.S. strategy to promote conflict and prevent stability. The USAID is the lead agency for the Global Fragility Act, so on and so forth. And so as ECOWAS is acting on the strategic level globally, you know that the U.S. and I suspect the others, other major partners like France and the UK and others, are operating both at the bilateral, respecting sovereignty levels, but also at an elevated level, for example, the EU and so forth. And so just for as ECOWAS grows and evolves over time, that is there. The last point is that yes, as I mentioned, we have specific building partner capacity programs. And so ECOWAS, you may, if and part of the ECOWAS policy kind of says, hey, we're open to sponsorships from others like international partners for our own growth and expansion. So just keep that in mind as you conduct business and international relations. Over.
Right. Thank you very much. Right. On this note, we come to the end of another Sankofa African webinar. We hope to see you next week, Friday, taking a look at the constitutional change or reform in Togo. And we'll try to negotiate with some of our panelists today, if we're able to have a second series, to be able to delve into Niger and the superpower competition over there. So on this note, we say goodbye and enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you next week on the Sankofa African webinar.